In the first days of July 1863, two American armies met around a small Pennsylvania town because roads, timing, fear, and opportunity drew them there. Gettysburg was not chosen as a grand arena in advance. It became one because Confederate units searching through southern Pennsylvania collided with Union cavalry, and because both commanders understood that the ground around the town could decide more than one day of fighting. By the end of the third day, fields, orchards, ridges, rocks, and fences had become names remembered across generations. The campaign began after Chancellorsville. Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia had won a dramatic victory in Virginia, but victory had not ended the war. Virginia farms were strained, Confederate resources were thin, and Lee believed another movement north might relieve pressure, gather supplies, threaten Northern morale, and perhaps influence politics. His army crossed into Pennsylvania in June. The move was bold, but it also stretched communication and forced the Confederate Army to operate in unfamiliar country. The Union Army of the Potomac was changing at the same moment. Joseph Hooker was replaced by George Gordon Meade only days before the battle. Meade inherited a huge responsibility: find Lee, protect Washington and Baltimore, and avoid being lured into a disastrous position. Union cavalry under John Buford reached Gettysburg first and recognized the value of the ridges south of town. Buford's troopers delayed the Confederate advance long enough for infantry to arrive. That first decision helped shape the entire battle. On July 1st, fighting opened west and north of Gettysburg. Confederate divisions pushed hard against Union cavalry and then against the arriving 1st and 11th Corps. The Union line was forced back through the town, with many soldiers captured in the streets and fields, but the retreat did not become a complete rout. Union troops rallied on Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, and Cemetery Ridge. Those heights formed a hooked defensive line south of Gettysburg. The first day was a Confederate tactical success, but the Union Army still held the crucial high ground. The terrain mattered because Civil War armies were not abstractions on a map. Men marched through heat and dust, climbed stone-strewn slopes, loaded rifles behind fences, dragged guns into position, and tried to understand orders through smoke and noise. Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, Cemetery Ridge, the Peach Orchard, the Wheatfield, Devil's Den, Little Round Top, and the town roads all shaped what commanders could see and what units could survive. Gettysburg became a battle of decisions made under the pressure of terrain. On July 2nd, Lee attacked both Union flanks. James Longstreet's corps moved against the Union left, where confused positioning created danger around the Peach Orchard. Fighting spread through the Wheatfield, Devil's Den, and the rocky slopes near Little Round Top. The struggle was close, violent, and often local. Regiments lost direction, batteries fired at short range, and officers had minutes to fill gaps. On Little Round Top, Union units including the 20th Maine helped hold a position that protected the flank of the army. The Union right was also tested. Confederate attacks struck Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill as daylight faded. Men fought among trees, rocks, entrenchments, and gun flashes. The fighting on the right did not become as famous as the charge on the third day, but it mattered because it threatened the hinge of the Union line. If Culp's Hill or Cemetery Hill had fallen decisively, the Union position could have become untenable. Instead, the defensive line bent and held. For Lee, the second day offered partial success but not a breakthrough. For Meade, it was a night of danger and calculation. He had taken heavy losses, and some officers wondered whether the army should withdraw. Meade held a council of war and chose to stay. That decision was not simple bravado. It reflected the strength of the ground, the cost already paid to hold it, and the danger of retreating under pressure. The armies prepared for another day. On July 3rd, fighting resumed at Culp's Hill in the morning. Union troops attacked to recover lost works, and Confederate forces tried again to break the right. The hill was rugged, wooded, and difficult to control. Its importance was practical. It protected the Baltimore pike, the Union rear, and the shape of the defensive line. By late morning, Confederate hopes there had faded. Lee then turned toward the center. The Great Confederate Assault on July 3rd is often called Pickett's Charge, though it included more than George Pickett's division. After a massive artillery bombardment, thousands of Confederate soldiers stepped from the woods and advanced across open ground toward Cemetery Ridge. They had to cross fences, fields, and deadly artillery and rifle fire. The target was the Union center near the angle and a small clump of trees. The attack showed extraordinary discipline and courage, but courage could not erase distance, exposure, and prepared defense. At the stone wall, some Confederates briefly reached the Union line. The moment became known as the high-water mark of the Confederacy, a phrase that can oversimplify the war but captures the symbolism of the attack's failure. Union reinforcements, artillery, and infantry fire stopped the assault. The field in front of Cemetery Ridge was left covered with casualties. Lee's army had not been destroyed, but its northern offensive had been broken. Gettysburg was not the only major event of July 1863. On July 4th, Vicksburg surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant, giving the Union control of the Mississippi River. Together, Gettysburg in the east and Vicksburg in the west changed the strategic picture. The Confederacy could still fight for nearly 2 more years, and the war's outcome was not instantly settled. But after Gettysburg, Lee would not again mount an invasion of the North on the same scale. The human cost was staggering. Combined casualties at Gettysburg were roughly 50,000 killed, wounded, captured, or missing. The town became a vast hospital and burial ground. Civilians sheltered wounded men, searched for relatives, and lived with the smell, wreckage, and trauma of battle. For soldiers, the memory was not a clean diagram of arrows. It was thirst, fear, torn clothing, mud, smoke, noise, and friends who did not answer roll call. In November, Abraham Lincoln came to Gettysburg to dedicate a national cemetery. His address was brief, but it reframed the battlefield as a test of democratic government and unfinished work. Lincoln did not celebrate battle for its own sake. He asked whether a nation conceived in liberty could endure, and whether the living would commit themselves to the work for which the dead had given the last full measure of devotion. The speech made Gettysburg a place of memory as well as military history. Gettysburg matters because it shows the Civil War at multiple scales at once. It was a campaign shaped by strategy, logistics, and politics. It was a battle shaped by hills, roads, ridges, farms, and split-second command decisions. It was also an ordeal carried by ordinary soldiers and civilians. The 3 days did not end slavery by themselves, did not end the war by themselves, and did not make victory painless. But they marked a turning point in momentum, morale, and national meaning. When we look back at Gettysburg, the danger is to turn it into inevitability. Lee had to lose, Meade had to hold, and the stone wall had to become legend. The real battle was less certain. It was made from delayed cavalry, hard marching, unclear orders, contested high ground, artillery smoke, and thousands of individual acts of endurance. Gettysburg became history because people in those fields did not know the ending and still had to act.